I don't have to say it anymore. Zoom does it for me.
Nice.
Welcome to this edition of Beers with Bill. It's my pleasure this evening to have Matt Duimering from Reverance Barrel Works and Brewery Brew Company. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So we're going to start with the Brewery Brew Company, the Duimering, the lager. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. This recipe to me is pretty special, as it was one of the ones that actually came from back in the homebrewing days. Now a lot of it has changed, of course, with going up scaling and being able to play with so many different malts and whatnot in there. But it's a Munich Helles, which to me is the best style of lager. It's fine in the cold months. It's also fine in the warm months. It's not too hoppy. It's not too malty. It has that sort of Goldilocks zone on it. So for me, it's what I always sort of reach for. Recently, we switched up our base malt, which we had been using for the same thing since it started, and I'm really happy with what we switched to. We went from a German floor malted Pilsner to a Czech floor malted Pilsner from a smaller maltster, and it's just, we think that it's really increased the clarity. I say that this right now passes the Bible test, so I could put that tiny little font behind it kind of thing and read through it. That was just on the most recent batch that we switched that up.
So what spurred you to change up the malt?
Doing some reading, and then also like when you hear someone else that says, I'm having a lot of luck with this, and the other malt we were using beforehand was the most expensive base malt that we had in-house. This was $2 cheaper per sack, so obviously nothing when it comes to the grand scale of things. But I was like, hey, if I could save $8 every batch, maybe I'll try something different. So did a small scale test with it. Really, really loved how it turned out. I think this malt is slightly under modified, which allows for us to do some more step mashing and do some different stuff in there.
Okay. But that's sort of the game that you and Brett have with Brewery and Reverance. You are very experimental.
Correct. Duimering, we've only brewed twice the same, actually. A big part of it at the beginning was finding actually the specific Munich malt that we really wanted to use. A lot of people hear Munich malt and it's all the same, but if I give you, a pinch of a few different Munich malts from different maltsters, and even maltsters have multiple different versions, you'll see such a wide variety in flavors. So that was something we played with last winter. And then on this one, when we went to the new base grain, we went to the Munich malt that we favored the most. That stuff, I just eat it like breakfast cereal in the morning.
Eric's, oh, Troy's in.
But yeah, constantly being a small scale brewer, it's really awesome to be able to do these small batches and focus in on specific ingredients and play with the different suppliers.
Okay. I'm curious how you and Brett met.
We met because my father had a friend, and that friend had a friend, and that friend had a son, and that son had a friend who wanted to get into the brewing business. So really, really far apart, kind of. We didn't really know each other. Anyways, I was like, sure, I need someone that can help do the business side, that wants to be production, because that's not my forte doing business. I'm more based on production and brewing. So we met, grabbed a beer at Wurst downtown Toronto on King Street together. And it was about 3 minutes into the conversation, it just clicked, as we had sort of a similar vision. And then from there, we got to where we are today.
How long ago was that the two of you met?
I want to say that was 2018. I'm sure I could go through my emails and get the exact day.
Okay, well, I just curious how long that's been. And
yeah, I'm going to say fall 2018.
Yep. And that was...
I was still working my office job. I hadn't quit that yet. At some point in 2018.
Okay. And that was based on the decision that you were going to open up a brewery.
Correct. Yeah.
So how did that transpire for you? Like, when did that sort of hit you that that's what you wanted to do?
Obviously, like every home brewer, they're like, oh, I'm making beer that's at least palatable. Like this might be a cool gig. Long story short is brewing is like 5% of the work, if that. Like it's mainly cleaning, paperwork, ordering labels, all that other kind of work. Um, but I was working in the graphic design industry and really did not like the corporate life. So one day I kind of just got fed up with that, took a sticky note and wrote letter of resignation, signed my name and slapped it on my monitor and walked out. I said, enough of this. And then later that afternoon, I walked into People's Pint in Toronto. They're located in the Junction. And I said, hey, you guys need someone to work? And they said, yep, 2 days ago, our front of house manager gave us his 2 weeks. So we need someone to help fill some holes. So perfect. I was jobless for only a few hours.
Wow. Okay. So that started the road to here.
Yeah, exactly. I also knew Pete and Doug, the two owners and founders over at People's Pint, pretty well.
Yeah.
So like, obviously I told them my situation, like I'm not a long-term employee. I'm working on getting my own thing up and running, but like I want to help and I'm eager to learn kind of thing.
Yeah. A couple people are impressed that you resigned on a sticky note.
I have a picture somewhere on my phone. I look at it every so often. It brings me so much joy.
I imagine it does. And so what was
I
it
hate-
like, the decision in 2018 to get into brewing and opening up in 2020? What was that 2-year gap like for you?
Well, originally it was not supposed to be that big of a gap, but anyone who's owned a business before will probably say the same thing. Finding a location that either purchase or rent is next to impossible. And it is a seller's market right now. So we were just scouring everywhere until we could actually find a location to get started in.
I know that Cambridge wasn't your first choice because you really wanted to be in Toronto. How did you fall in? How did you fall into Cambridge?
Well, we first were like, oh, Toronto's a great place. There's a lot of people. They have an amazing transit system. So drunk driving's never really a concern there. Let's look in Toronto. And then I looked at one place and it was right by where the Rhino is on Queen Street. So not like fully downtown, but it's getting there. And it was something like $90 a square foot for rent. So I just I didn't have a coffee or nothing in my hand, but if there was anything, I would have spat it out kind of thing. And I was like, okay, maybe we need to look at more economical options here. So I grew up in Kitchener-Waterloo. So this region kind of has been like my home base. My parents are still here. So that was like, okay, I'm going to go look there because I know that area a little bit.
Okay. What was it like when you walked into the space you're in now for the first time?
For the first time, so it used to be Wosley Plumbing. So there was like a whole bunch of like, I don't know, floor tiles from like the 70s or something, stuff that outdates me. There's a lot of work that needed to be done in the building. We actually opened up selling beer to the public when there was still a trench dug across the entire brewery floor because it was pandemic. You couldn't have anyone in there doing work. So we were like packaging on one side where the forklift could kind of access stuff, and then opening up the garage door to sell out of on the weekends because we just couldn't have people in the space. It was a process.
I can well imagine, and especially opening during the pandemic.
Oh, super ideal. But when you have barrels, you kind of just have to listen to them, and when they say they're ready, and when the government says, here's your licensing, you just kind of got to take it. Because we were asking to get the licensing in place for as long as we possibly could, as soon as we were brewing, basically. And they're like, no, we need to have everything ready for inspections, yada, yada. And then 1 week into the pandemic, and we got a call from them, which is the first time they ever called us. And they're like, hey, do you want that license? And we're like, yes, please. It's almost like they need to collect some tax money.
Yeah, that. Derek's curious. You guys have an anniversary date the same as Third Moon?
No, we are, I think Third Moon is May 14th.
It's around, it's the middle of May, yes.
Yeah. Ours, we don't really have an official one because like we just like put the website live and didn't really make an announcement for the first few days. So we're calling our anniversary May 1st. So really, really close.
Okay. So I'm curious, when you're brewing, what would I find on your playlist?
Absolutely nothing. Uh, I listen, and when I'm in that brewery, I can hear the sounds of what's all going on. So I like to brew in silence because if I hear a little bit of running water or a compressor sounding a little funny, I can go over and see what's going on. And oftentimes that's helped me not waste a whole lot of money and send product down the drain. Now, if I'm packaging, that's a different story. Then I'm usually listening to some sort of metal.
Any particular favorite band?
I've been listening to a lot of Black Tongue recently, just because it's heavy and you can't really understand what it is. So it's beautiful background noise, elevator music, but more intense.
I get that background noise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wish you would have done differently in the process of opening?
Cool. Well, it goes back to a really old saying I've heard from a lot of brewery owners, and it's the best way to make $1 million in a brewery is to start with 5 million. So obviously, starting with deeper pockets, that's obviously not an easy thing to do. Just because we had to build slowly, like we didn't have our really nice stainless tanks for clean side off the bat. That's why we started with all mixed ferment stuff. So it was like we had to sell enough beer for us to save up, pay our bills, and then go invest in the next set of equipment kind of stuff. And we're still doing that.
Okay. Got a huge investment in barrels sitting there, though.
Oh, there's a lot of liquid sitting in there. Yes. Just a couple bucks.
Yeah. But I was impressed with the storage system that you have designed.
Yeah, we worked with a local engineer from Delta Elevator on that. Sort of looked at the traditional barrel racking like you see at most breweries, and like if I wanted that bottom barrel, I have to go digging, which I don't want to do that with a forklift. Or if it's like a block 3 setup, I was chatting with Kevin one day. It's like, how long does it take you to get that barrel from the back? He's telling me it's a full day for an employee to get that barrel out, empty the barrel, and then put everything back in. Like for me, that's like 30 minutes. So we wanted to make an easy system to use, and then we also wanted to make a little bit of a statement piece in the tap room, which is that beautiful barrel wall that you kind of walk into.
It does make a statement when you walk into the brewery the first time.
Oh yeah, we have so many people that they walk in, like we're at the bar, like, "Hey, welcome to Reverance Barrel Works. How are you doing?" And they're like, "Yeah. Oh, this looks nice." They ignore us for like 30 seconds, stare at the barrels, and then they come over and like, "You were saying?"
Well, I wasn't quite the same way, but I walked in and stood in the doorway for 30, 40 seconds to just take that wall in.
Yeah, it's a sight to behold for sure. That's one of the best things is like walking in there, even if I know I'm gonna have a rough day from what's happening, like walking in and seeing that is calming.
Yeah. See, Brawley and Reverence, sort of opposite sides of a coin.
Yeah, that's exactly like how to look at it. So obviously we started as Reverence, mainly focusing on barrels, and that kind of came down to we can't afford to do the clean side stuff and the dirty stuff because you need separate pieces of equipment and other investments. So last summer in, I think it was August, we had started with Germain, which was just our single clean side beer, and really cobbling together equipment. It was not a nice process of how we started that, but we made it work. And then that was sort of just like, okay, are people interested in clean beer if we're coming here? Which the answer was yes, we sold out of that batch pretty quickly. So we made that sort of a full-time thing. We're brewing it about every 6 weeks at this point, just to keep up with that kind of demand. So as soon as we saw that that was something people wanted, we really started looking into doing it more, and then wanting to separate the two things, because we do those slushy beers, which some people will say that's not real beer. And I would say to them, it's 66.666% beer. So that's technically beer in the eyes of the law. But that doesn't really, to me, feel like Reverence. That doesn't really meet that word. So we wanted to separate the two.
Okay. Which beer are we going to try next?
I think we should go for the DIPA.
The double IPA? Okay. Nebulous.
Yeah. So we have one production employee right now. His name is also Matt. I call him Other Matt. Um, he works right now. He works part-time with us, and one of the things that we decided to give him sort of as a task at the brewery was, hey, we want to give you a beer that's kind of yours. Here's the parameters. So around 8%, big, juicy, hazy, something that's going to get that crowd of people. As you know, those are the popular beers. They're what bring people in. We kind of gave that as a side project. This is his 4th version, I think, of it now. And he's been really doing well with it. And we're excited to keep moving along with this beer. This one was with Waiti and Wakatu, which are 2 lesser known New Zealand hops. Everyone, when they think New Zealand hops, go to like Nelson Sauvin. But I find it brings a really nice sort of fresh cut grass thing to the beer. Some underripe mangoes. And a little bit of peachiness. Yeah. It's tasty.
It is. It's very tasty.
And it does not drink like it's 8%. I also told him, I'm like, I want people to drink this and then down a pint and look at it and be like, oh, I should not have had that quickly. We wanted to make it dangerous.
Derek's curious why Delta Elevator for the design work.
My father owns a woodworking shop, and he did all the elevator panels. The elevator panels that are in Sir John A. Macdonald High School, I made those when I was in high school. And then I was taking the elevator there. I'm like, hey, I made these. So that's funny. But we just had a working relationship there. Someone there owed us a favor. So we were able to call that favor in for this, which was lucky for us.
Does it actually have like a raising and lowering component to it?
No, that's what
a picture.
We have a reach truck that does that. So it's a forklift that can go in and out while staying stationary. So that's
happened to be just an engineer you knew then. It's not the fact that the elevator is kind of red herring.
No, that would be cool, but that would be quite expensive because we got the original. The original design for that. I was looking at another barrel racking system called OXO line or OXO line. They're based out of France, and I got a quote on it, and it was like 250 to 300,000. And I'm like, oh no, I could not afford that. So that's where we were like, okay, let's look at the basics of what we want on this. It can't be that expensive. It's not much custom work aside from just welding some stuff together. It was just there was no like custom pieces of metal. It was all prefab that we used for it.
Now, beer, unlike wine, does not like to be disturbed very often, does it, when it's in a barrel?
No, it does not. And I mean, even like wine, some wine likes to be disturbed, but not all wines like to be disturbed, because oxygen is not a nice thing to beer.
Yeah, but in wine, they can move barrels and not be overly concerned about it.
Yeah, as long as their fill level is good. So like, again, like if you're aging something for 3 years, you're going to slowly have that angel share lost in there.
Yeah.
And that might be concerning if you're moving and sloshing stuff, but that was also why the rack we designed is what we designed.
Yeah.
You just don't have to move multiple barrels.
Well, I can imagine, like you say, block 3, having to take everything out to get the one at the back. You've moved everything at that point.
Yeah, I mean, even with our racking system, we still have barrels that we taste and it's like, oh, goodness, no, put that down the drain.
Yeah.
And like, that's from trying to store it at ideal temperatures. Like that's climate controlled in that room as well. We don't have big temperature swings.
Yeah.
But that's just the nature of barrel aged beer. And every barrel has its own personality. Some of them are good. Some of them are bad. Some of them are great, but the bad ones, they show themselves pretty quickly.
I just had this picture in my head of like, oh, the barrels at that end, they're the bad barrels. The barrels at this end are the good ones. Keep them apart.
Oh, no. I wouldn't want to move the barrels from end to end. That'd be disturbing it too much. No, I have about 8 barrels on that wall right now that I need to wash the drain with, unfortunately.
So Mike's curious, when you have to dump a barrel, do you also discard the barrel or do you just sanitize it or something?
So I will, if I have to discard it, I'll look at why am I discarding it? What happened to the beer? So like there was one barrel recently that it was up high on the rack. And then this was like in like June or July. And I'm like, why are there so many fruit flies in here? And then I was going around and there was the bung in the top was missing and it was just swarming with flies. I'm like, yeah, that one's gone. We're getting rid of that. There's no way I can clean all that out of there. So that one got dumped. And then literally the next day someone came in and was like, hey, do you have any barrels for sale? I'm like, yes, but do not use this for aging stuff. It is furniture grade only. The others, though, if I can identify what was wrong with it, like if it was oxidation, which is what leads to most issues in a barrel, that I can usually recooper. I was lucky enough to have a brief seminar with a German cooper in 2019, sort of on how to retouch up barrels and fix stuff. It's only like 2 hours with them, but I learned so much. There's only, I think, 2 coopers even in Canada. So it's a pretty rare person to come across. So we can clean them up and I'll fill them with boiling water to kind of sanitize them as best as possible.
Yeah. No, I'm jealous because I would have loved to have been on a seminar on coopering barrels. That's quite an art form.
It is. Sometimes I'll directly fruit into barrels. So then obviously when I empty it, when I'm done, I have to pop the head off, get all the fruit off of it and get everything back together and liquid tight again. Haven't had any go off yet, so fingers crossed. Getting lucky with that.
Derek's curious. Do you hedge your bets when you do a batch of beer and put it in multiple different barrel types, or do you stay specifically with certain types of barrels for certain beers?
So we're a small brew system. Like I could push it and do 3 spirit barrels off of a single brew, but usually I just stick to 2 because like if I'm doing 3, liquid is boiling out of the pot as I'm going, which obviously safety concerns there. So typically I'll just do like the same barrels unless I'm splitting something. So like if it's a big stout, it'll be into 2 bourbon barrels, or it might be like, oh, I'll get a rum barrel in there. But oftentimes it's the same barrel type just because it's easy to track batches that way.
Yep. So with your days at home brewing,
Yep.
Is there any beer that you haven't made yet that you wanted to make?
Not really. That was the awesome thing about homebrewing is even if it was I know people say there's no bad types of beer. I disagree. There are awful styles of beer. I made everything that I wanted to make. So now, I mean, becoming a pro brewer, it's a little different because I get to play with other stuff. Just like barrels specifically, getting more high-end ingredients. Like as a home brewer, getting vanilla beans, like that's like $30 just to make like 30 beers. It's expensive to work with that stuff. We're lucky enough that we buy vanilla by the kilogram. It still is like $600, but it's a little cheaper.
Yep. And this is in honor of Terry because he usually asks this question eventually. Is there any beer that you've tried from another brewer where you immediately go, damn, I wish I'd made that beer?
Oh, definitely. Most certainly. First time that happened, buddy of mine from Thunder Bay was down in Toronto. So anytime he came to visit, we do a little bottle share kind of thing. And I'm sure some of the people on here have heard of the brewery called Bottle Logic out of the States. Big hype brewery, big stouts, all that stuff. And he brought over their, I guess the closest thing they had to a flagship, their Fundamental Observation, which is just a bourbon barrel aged stout with vanilla. Not super exciting as far as beer styles go in 2019 when we had that. But I was like, okay, I'm excited to have this, but it was perfection in a glass. There was nothing wrong with that beer. And it was like 14%, and it was like drinking just nectar. It was so smooth and dangerous. So yeah, that's definitely one of the beers I've done that with. And then other ones, if you've ever been to Vermont and gone to Von Trapp Brewery, actually owned by the family that The Sound of Music is about, they make some of the best lagers I've had in my entire life. And anything that's a lager from them, you just put your lips to that glass and it's just like beautiful music playing in the background. It's very euphoric having their stuff.
Now I have a curious question. With everything that's happened over the last year, how does Matt stay grounded?
This, Matt?
Yeah.
Well, now that we're allowed to see people again, about once a week, I'll play Dungeons and Dragons with the Short Finger crew and a few others. So Rob and Kat and 3 other friends will get together and play that, have a little potluck. So that's one thing that definitely stays grounded, and it's that small bit of socialization. The other thing that keeps me grounded is my Xbox. I like being able to escape and go into a different world on there, whatever RPG I feel like playing at the time. And naps, lots of naps when I can have them. I've fallen asleep on grain sacks numerous times at the brewery.
Yeah, but that's probably more to the fact you're working way too many hours.
Yeah, our first brew, I was stubborn. I wanted the brew on the 1st of May, and our grain arrived at 4:30 p.m. So I was like, well, I'm doing it. So I was up until like 3 a.m. brewing. So I'm like, I'm way too tired. I'm not driving home. I laid out some malt sacks on the concrete floor and fell asleep on there.
That definitely is tenacious. What can I say?
Yeah, get my stubbornness. My dad would say I get my stubbornness from my mother. She would say I get my stubbornness from him. I think I get it from both of them.
Probably got it from your grandparents on both sides.
Oh, most certainly. My mother's mother is sweet, but goodness, is she ever stubborn.
Yes, I don't know too many grandparents who aren't.
Yeah.
What's been the hardest hurdle for you to overcome during COVID?
I think the hardest hurdle for us right now, and it's an unfortunate one, is we didn't get the initial like burst that a lot of breweries get. You know, we haven't had festival season. We haven't been able to do a lot of tap takeover events and that kind of stuff. So a lot of times when new breweries open, Small Pony was a really great example. Like they went to some of the best bars in the area. They went to like Barvolo, Arabella. I think they were at Milosh as well. I can't remember, but they were able to go to like where like the craft beer geeks, so to say, love to hang out, and they were able to get their word out that way. Where for us, we've done a small event at Milosh, and we did a pretty major event at Arabella last October. But aside from that, we haven't been able to get out and do the stuff that we want. We haven't been able to do beer festivals, which is unfortunate. So that's been probably one of the most difficult hurdles for us right now.
What's been the best change, you think, because of COVID?
Has changed because of COVID? Oh, bottle shops, 100%. Like as horrible as this has been for everything else, the fact that some liquor laws were lifted and we got to move into we got to move into last century, like where everywhere else you could just open up a bottle shop. Now that's a thing that can happen. So you're not stuck with the LCBO. I can make, 500-liter batch of double IPA as a one-off, and I can distribute it across the province now instead of not being able to do that like before, that people would have to come direct to us. So that's been awesome for us as a business, and also on the consumer end. Like I've loved being able to go into like sidewalk bottle shop in town and be able to pick stuff up from Sonan Hill or Dominion City and take it home.
How has COVID shaped your message as a brewery?
Our message. I mean, we've always been support local. We have never bought yeast that's not from Escarpment Laboratories. We've also never paid shipping on it because it's literally 10 minutes away from Brett's house. So he picks it up on the way into the brewery. One beer that we're coming up to tasting, the Aspire, that's made with only Ontario ingredients, the spontaneous beer. So COVID hasn't really changed much of our message. We've always been, support local, support small when you can. We know obviously like no farms here can grow Citra just because that's part of the rules around that brand of hop. So it has to be grown in a specific region. But yeah, nothing's really changed there, which is nice that we haven't had the compromise.
Which beer from Reverance are we starting with?
Let's go for the Marquette. It's a really pretty color. I love looking at that beer. Where'd my bottle opener go? So this beer is a blend of our second and third brews that we ever did. And then aged on a passamento, so like sun-dried Marquette grapes from Traynor. So Marquette is a not super well-known grape. But it has lineage in the Pinot Noir family and does really well in cool climates like Ontario.
And say one of the easiest Pinot Noir varietals to grow in this region.
Yeah, it grows super well. It's delicious. This beer, it's been in bottles since I think April 2020. It's the largest batch that we've ever done. So that was kind of fun. Long packaging day. I think it took 18 hours for us to fill all the bottles by ourselves. Oh, and no lunch break because my boss is horrible. But like, you can see how deep that color is on here. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous red. It's about, I think it's close to 400 grams per liter of grape skins. So we don't get the grapes when they're fresh off the vine. We get them after the winery is done with them. So they've pressed them, they've gotten all their runoff, and then we pick up those skins and re-age stuff on. So if anyone here is familiar with piquette, I know Revel has been doing a lot of piquettes. That's sort of the same idea, but instead of putting water onto the grape skins and then letting it ferment, we put it in with already finished beer and let it sit for 5 to 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, it drinks like a small Pinot.
Yep.
The acidity on there.
So do you ferment them in the barrel then, I take it, sealed?
Not in the barrel, just because small berries specifically are a real pain to get in and out of barrels. So this is actually, we use IBC totes for this.
Okay.
It's easy to get stuff out of the bottom port then, because the grapes themselves, these were whole cluster grapes, which I love working with them because they actually build like a natural filter by all sitting together.
So you don't have to like punch them down like you do when you're fermenting.
We perform a few punch downs the first week that we're like re-fermenting with them in these totes. So the
Yeah.
tote's a nice big open top. So I rig up, not a proper punch down device, but it works. I sort of go and cram all the grapes back down, and you can actually by feel tell when the punch down is done, which is odd because you can't see it, you can just feel it.
Yeah, it's a tactile thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like all you have to do is do it once and be like, okay, now I know what I'm doing. But you could never write it on a book of how to do it, kind of thing. Just do it until it feels right.
Now, you guys, you and Brett have a drive to work with like-minded people who are interested in developing what you call the essence or terroir of Ontario. So I am curious, which beer have you made that you think best exhibits that essence or terroir of Ontario?
That's going to be the last beer that we have tonight, the Aspire. That's absolutely currently the only beer that we've packaged that really embraces that. So that's malts from Barnell and also unmalted wheat from Barnell. That is aged homegrown leaf hops that I got off a home brewer years ago and just neglected them because you don't want to have nice hops for that style of beer. You want to have them nasty and going through a weird cheese phase before you actually put them into the beer. And then spontaneous fermentation. So we just leave it outside overnight to sort of let Mother Nature drop stuff in there. And what gets in there is what ferments it. And we can't alter it from there.
Okay.
So that's definitely the most terroir focused. Now, something like the Marquette that we're sipping on here as well. Obviously, Ontario grapes, not all Ontario malts. I actually prefer a Pilsner malt that I can't get anymore, but it was a Belgian Pilsner that I just thought it tasted just like pure wildflower honey. And I loved working with it, but sadly, my suppliers don't carry it. But the base yeast that we use in all of our sours and saisons and stuff like that, all of it is a wild yeast that I captured about 6 years ago up in Thunder Bay, or not Thunder Bay, North Bay, sorry. So kind of neat that we work with a wild, now lab purified yeast culture for those.
And kept the Crane's pure, that strain pure for the last 6 years.
I haven't, but Escarpment Labs has.
Ah, okay.
So still in my homebrew days, I sent them an email. I'm like, hey, I captured some yeast. Is there any way that I could store it there? And they're like, sure. So now it's banked in there, and we can sort of access that when we need it, when we need a fresh pitch.
Okay.
But it is a aggressive fermenter. It does not leave much sugar behind. Like you may have noticed, that's quite a dry beer.
Yep.
It just rips through everything, but it's really well behaved. It doesn't make a big mess when it ferments, which is nice. Some stuff, I come in the morning and there's stuff everywhere on the floor. I'm like, oh, great, hours of mopping. Oh, great, you've plugged the floor drain again. That's always fun.
So when you're not brewing and at the brewery, you have a pastime that's cooking. I was wondering what your favorite dish to make is.
Whatever I'm craving. Favorite dish to make? Honestly, I just love working in the kitchen because it's something I can just dive fully into and sort of escape from what the world currently is. And I'm in my own little area when I do that. So anything that takes a while, I'm happy to do. But barbecue, I've been really enjoying doing that this summer. So like slow smoked meats and whatnot, because I'm patient when it comes to drinks. I can be patient when it comes to food. But yeah, I love doing different stuff. Any cuisine that I just sort of like eating, I'll try and cook it as best I can.
Yep. How do you decide what to brew?
So at the beginning, it was kind of, let's just brew a bunch of random stuff. So we ordered spirit barrels specifically for big heavy beers like barley wines and stouts, and then a bunch of wine barrels for doing like sours and saisons and whatnot. So at the beginning, it was kind of just building some stock with not any intent for any of it, sort of tasting it and seeing where it guided us. Now we kind of have been figuring out, how much of something we're able to move, and we're able to say, okay, we need to do another batch of saison, or we only have this many kegs of Germain left. We need to do another batch of that kind of thing. So I'm working on slowly getting a production schedule together, but that's difficult.
Well, I can imagine, because when you make a decision to put a beer into a barrel, it will tell you when it's ready. You can't actually tell it to be ready.
Well, exactly. I have no control over it. And like sometimes it's like, 8 months in, I'm not ready. 16 months in, I'm not ready. And month 17, it's like, I'm ready now, package me kind of thing. And like, I can't put something in a barrel and be like, oh, you know what? I really want to put this on plums when it's done. I have to, find the beer that tastes like it should be going on plums.
You've got a background in graphic design. Do you do the artwork, or you have someone else doing your artwork for your labels?
I do that, just again, small business, got to keep everything in house is what we can for now. So I take time and I do that, and it is time consuming. Holy cow.
I can well imagine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Who's your role model?
Probably my father. That'd be the best answer. He'd be happy if I said that. But he was a self-made man. Quit his job, went into starting his own business up. His father was a business owner. His father's father was a business owner. Somewhere back in the 1500s in Holland, one of my ancestors was a brewer over there. So I'm like, yeah, it's in the blood somewhere. But yeah, probably my dad's my role model.
Terry and Emma are curious, how often do you sample the barrels?
If it doesn't taste good, I forget about it for as long as I can. If it's starting to taste like it's getting there, I'll check on it kind of monthly. So usually I'll brew and I won't taste it for like 4 to 6 months, often, depending on what style it is. Like if it's a barley wine, just don't try it for 9 months. You will just hate it. It's awful. We make terrible, terrible beer when it goes into barrels, but we design it that it mellows out. It's just overly bitter and just, oh, it's awful. I've tricked Brett a few times to be like, oh man, you should taste that barrel over there. He's like, didn't we do that 2 months ago? I'm like, yeah, but you should really taste it. He tastes it like, what the hell, man? I'm like, well, now you know what a barrel shouldn't taste like. Gotta have some fun, right?
Well, yeah, when you two of you work that much together, you should have.
Oh yes. I mean, I see him more than I see my fiance, so
That's kind of usual when you have a small business like a brewery.
Oh yeah.
But you know, you're
Yeah.
spoiling the romance for everybody about owning a
Spoiling-
brewery.
Oh man, people put so much romance behind it. I'm like, you're basically just a janitor, but in a really hot, humid environment. That's all you are.
I've never heard it described that way, but it is a pretty apt description.
Oh yeah, tropical janitor. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. It's nice in the winter when you can brew with the door open, though, like that.
That's true.
Actually, November is really nice as well to brew, leaving the door open, no bugs coming in, not too cold. So November and April, I think, are my favorite months to be brewing in.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
What do you see that's new and exciting happening in the beer industry right now, the craft beer industry?
So Brett and I have been talking about this and trying to figure out, every year there's like a style of the year, right? So I'm sure many people here remember Bellwoods with Milk Shark, right? Milk Shark IPAs were all the thing. This past year, I'd say slushies were the thing. We're trying to see, and typically like we follow trends of the States. If it's happening in the States, give it 3-4 years, it's what becomes popular up here. There's no real new trend. So we're trying to figure that out. I'm thinking that pastry stouts are going to become a lot more prolific in craft beer, but I also think on the opposite end, lagers are going to become a lot more popular and a lot more people are going to be buying them regularly.
As opposed to the trend of Pilsners over the last 2 summers.
Well, even like in Pilsners, they've been growing in popularity as well. And we're hoping to see that keep increasing in popularity because like 2015, when I was along my craft beer journey, I wouldn't even look at a lager, right? I was like, oh, I want something that has taste. I need to taste things. And then all of a sudden started getting more back into nuance of things. And then you get into some of these beautiful Pilsners that are like, specifically stuff Godspeed is putting out is just beautiful. And there's so much delicate and nuanced flavors that I really, really love those. And they're fun to brew, bit of a pain in the summer because you have to knock out at such a cold temperature. So it takes forever. In the winter, it's fun though. Yeah, I'm hoping lagers become more popular and other smaller, delicate, more sessionable beers.
Yep. Who's your favorite craft beer bar or restaurant in the KW region?
Oh, I could get in trouble for that one.
That's true. You could.
I could get in trouble, but the one that I frequent the most, probably Arabella. Just because I also used to work at Arabella. I recognize obviously Terry and Emma from serving them at Arabella a few times. But love the atmosphere there, love the team there. Ben's really dedicated into bringing quality in. So for me, that was the place that I always like to go and hang out at. Where have I been going recently? Honestly, I haven't really been going out too much. Gone out to Willowbald a few times just because it's beautiful to go and sit out in their farm field there. Been too busy brewing.
Well, that's the nature of that romantic business you're in.
Oh yeah. Also, I don't usually keep beer at home. I typically keep wine at home because it doesn't feel like work then.
Well, I
Right,
did notice in
feeling-
I did notice in one of the write-ups about you that you do have a preferences in wine.
Yep. If I have my choice in things, I'm gonna sit there and sip some wine instead.
Yeah.
But again, like it doesn't feel like work, and wine has just as much variety as beer. Typically a little drier as well. I'm not a big fan of the heavy sweet beers, but that's what's popular, so we make them.
That's absolutely true.
Yep. We planned to do originally, we were like, oh yeah, we'll do like 2 stouts a year. That'll be like what we'll do, 2, bourbon barrel aged stouts. And then we released our first one last June. Nothing like a rye barrel aged vanilla imperial stout in June, right? And it was gone in like a weekend. So we're like, oh crap. Now I have to make more of these. So that program.
That's a good thing.
It is a good, well, they're not a fun brew day. It is the most backbreaking work imaginable because of all the grain that's going in there. We if you ever see what it looks like in there when we're brewing, like we take the whole lid off the mash tun and like grains this far from the surface kind of thing. We have to disassemble, take some of the parts out so that we can actually make it work in there, and it's fun. I think the longest stout brew day that we had was a 30-hour brew.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
was because I got fed up during the boil. So I'm like, I'll turn this off, put the lid on, and then come back in 6 hours once I get some sleep.
I can imagine that. Wow.
Okay.
Talk to me about Aspire.
So Aspire is kind of where a lot of the idea behind Reverance came from. So I started again homebrewing. Obviously, I wanted to push styles and do different things. And lambic, as I'm sure everyone here that knows that has purchased a lambic, it's not a super accessible beverage. So I was like, you know what? It's cool. It's steeped in history. I want to try making it. So I did. Whole 3 to 4 hour turbine mash and a 3-hour boil, and leaving it out in cool temperatures to cool down naturally overnight. No pitched yeast. And to my surprise, in the Huron Business Park in Kitchener at the time, it fermented beautifully. I'm like, okay, it didn't taste good for 6 months. It tasted awful for 6 months. It was just vile. And then all of a sudden around month 8, it started to taste nice. And about a year in, I was like, okay, I'm going to package this and enjoy this. So I did that. And then the next year I was like, okay, let's see if that wasn't just a one-off thing. So did it again. Sure enough, tasting great again. So I was like, okay, spontaneous beers can be done in a historic fashion in Canada. Why are breweries not doing this? Like, this is, everyone talks about, history of beer, and Instagram loves talking about that when advertising new styles, but you really don't see places putting this investment in doing the beers. So that was a big inspiration behind what we wanted to do. We actually aren't brewing any more golden sours ever. We're moving 100% of that production over to spontaneous this year. So the remaining golden sours will be packaged up, but everything else is going to spontaneous in that program.
That should be interesting and exciting.
Yeah. Because the first year we did it, we did 4 brews. Second year that we did it, we did 4 brews. And now we're going to probably be doing 12 to 18, depends on barrels and how we're looking this winter. Let's hope this doesn't make a mess on me. Oh, good, it's behaved. But yeah, we did not think we were actually going to have Aspire available this year, just because the Belgians obviously are famous for the Gueuze, the blend of 1, 2, and 3. And plenty of them do a 1-2 blend as well. But we tasted some of the barrels at the 8-month mark and found 3 that were just fantastic. So we monitored them pretty close for the next couple months before packaging them up and blending them, of course. But it was nice to see that those flavors of what Ontario is, and more specifically Cambridge, in that industrial area that we are, and how beautiful of a beer it can kind of make. Lively acidity on there. Some funk, a little bit of weird bitterness in the back, but complements that acidity. Really happy with how that's turned out. We also, if you look at that label there, you'll see a little MT stamp on it, which is Method Traditionnel. A bunch of lambic brewers and American spontaneous producers got together and said, what can we come up with that means lambic, but not from the lambic region? So in order for us to put that stamp on there, there's a list of 20 different steps that we have to follow for production, packaging, aging, all that stuff. We decided to follow that and put that stamp on there instead of saying spontaneous beer, just because I don't want to cut any corners when going down that and do the historic styles.
Derek's curious what your favorite beer is at Reverence, and also at the same time, which one signifies what you guys are really trying to do at Reverence Barrel Works.
So believe it or not, Aspire is not my favorite beer there. It's one of them. That definitely signifies what we're trying to do there. My favorite beer was a beer we did last year, which was a acidulous heel melon. So it was a dry hop Brett Saison. We just released the follow-up for it this past weekend, which was acidulous Bramling Cross. So again, dry hop Saison. It has hoppy flavors in there that are fresh. It has bitterness. It has funk. It has oak. It's dry. It's, for me, that's what I really like drinking. It's like a lager, but jacked up. It's delicate, but still very, very nuanced. And I do love bitterness.
What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Best advice I've ever been given. Brewing related or?
Whatever.
Probably don't go to bed angry. Makes the next day a lot easier when you don't go to bed angry. So you can assume, as Brett and I working close together, you know, things will happen. Anger's, you know, you'll get into arguments and flare and trying to come up with business decisions like that, but we always do our best to resolve our differences. Don't go to bed angry at each other. Always start the day off right.
I have a question.
The fiance and I as well.
Oh, you mean Brett and you aren't? No.
You would think so. Sometimes I will teasingly call him sweetheart or darling.
I'm sure that goes over well.
That usually gets a laugh.
I would imagine so. You guys have worked together long enough now to know each other well enough.
Yeah. Sweetheart, you'll have to speak up. I can't hear you over the pump.
If you could spend a day brewing with or talking about beer with someone, who would that person be?
I'm not going to say the last name because I'll butcher it, but Armand from Dre Fontainen. I was lucky enough to meet him once. Really humble, sweet man, and lots of passion and love for what he does. Or well, he's pretty much retired now, but if he wanted to get on a brew deck, I would love to be able to hang out with him. You know, his family is steeped in that tradition. It's a generational thing. So definitely him.
That's not where you got engaged, was it?
It was.
We
got engaged. Yeah, obviously, Gleamer Imports brings Dre Fontainen in here, and I know Rich fairly well. I think he's coming by the brewery this coming Saturday. I'd have to double check that. But I asked him, I'm like, hey, looking to ask for a weird favor. Can you get me a private tour at Dre Fontainen? I want to propose to my fiance. So he was able to hook us up, and we had a private tour from the head of global sales. They only have one salesperson. Took us on a tour around the place. And he was great. You know, we walk in there and Jordan looks at me. He's like, man, the Belgians are just so nice. Everyone's smiling. And it's like, yeah, they all know what's happening. The entire brewery knows what's going down here. Of course they're smiling, right? But she wasn't catching on to any of that. And apparently I found out afterwards, a friend of mine who lives in Europe went over there, went on a tour. And apparently we were added on the tour saying in front of this fooder, a young couple got engaged.
So you're famous over there.
Somewhat, yes.
Who's your favorite up and coming new brewer?
Up and coming new brewer. What have I had that I really loved recently? That's a tough one. So a lot of breweries also are starting to do their own new programs. Like Rob from Shortfinger, he started doing his own lagers now, and I've been really digging that. If you guys have had Fresh Hell, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't had Fresh Hell, go get some. Yeah. So I love seeing that program coming out of Rob. He makes excellent saisons. His pale ales have been on point, but seeing those lagers has been awesome. Other up and coming new brewers. I'm excited to see, I can't mention it. I'm not allowed to mention it just because it's still a startup and I don't know what's all going, but there is another barrel house coming to Ontario that we probably won't see for 2 years just because of the nature of it. But I'm really excited to see what they're going to be bringing in. Very, very focused on terroir and whole only Ontario fruit, all that stuff. So really excited to see a program like that coming up.
If you could go back in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, Magnums don't sell as well as you think they're going to sell. I think we have like an entire pallet of Magnums at the brewery right now, which is fine. They're not going bad for 20 years. But that was something I would have rather invested in something else at this point, just because originally with startup, we were like, all right, we're going to be brewing for this long and then we're going to open and it's going to be good to go. And then COVID came around and everything got stretched out. But yeah, that would be one of the big things, would just be like focus a little better instead of doing the fun, cool stuff, you know, really dial down on some others, some more important aspects.
And what's the one thing you'd like everyone to take away from our chat tonight?
Honestly, I don't really know. I just want everyone to love, you know, what's in the craft beer community, explore. Beer is more than just hazy IPAs, even though we had one tonight. You know, try different styles, even if it's a style you typically don't like. Try it from another brewery, because everyone has their own take on it. Beer is an art form.
Especially what you're doing is an art form.
Even like pale ales, I'd say that that's an art form. There's so many different approaches you can take to them. And I think it's neat that we see, you know, you have people like Third Moon that are focusing on those hazy pale ales. You have other people who are focusing on those classic West Coast ones and everything in between. People focusing on using, you know, hops from specific regions. Yeah, there's just so much you can do with it. So it's neat to be able to be like, sure, I don't like a pale ale from XYZ brewery, but I love it from these guys.
Matt, thank you for taking time out of your busy life to have a conversation and share your beers with us. We all appreciate that.
I really appreciate being here.
Yeah. And everybody, Keith Carmen was supposed to be doing the Halloween show with me next week. Unfortunately, things have come up. Mike Brookfield, thank you, is joining us next week, and look forward to having an enlightening chat with Mike about home brewing and beer.
Awesome. Sounds like a fun one.